So here's what I want to show you. I want to show you 3 polls, okay? And one of them may or may not be a poll, and we'll get your thoughts on it. So first thing that's going around, here's New York Times, okay? Who did well in the debate? I was about to say podcast. So did better, scored 10, Nikki Haley, then they have DeSantis, then they have Chris Christie, then they have Tim Scott, then they have you last, okay?
Yep.
Now, keep in mind, this is New York Times. Let's go to the next one.
And it's not a poll, you know that, right?
Yeah,
This
that's an opinion.
That's just their opinion.
That's
No, just go back to it. Go back to it. Go back to it. I want to make sure that's right. Yeah. Opinion writers and so their own opinion writing
writers
staff.
and contributors.
Yeah.
Their own staff who writes for
Which is great. By the way, but by the way, to me, I see this as flip it, is how I see it.
100%.
Okay? But go to the next one. This is David Pakman. You've been on a show, and I thought it was a very good show, the two of you guys together.
Yep.
This guy's a far-left, hardcore, liberal guy. He thinks Biden's doing a fantastic job.
I talk to the left. I like talking to the left.
And I thought it was a very good conversation with the two of you. At the bottom here is Tim Scott, okay? Then it's DeSantis. Then it's you. Then it's Chris Christie. Then Nikki Haley. By the way, the weird thing is, Democrats, 37,000 votes, so this is actual votes on Twitter, are choosing Nikki Haley, then Chris Christie, you in the middle. This is how I process this. On New York Times, they want him last. On a David Pakman, they have you right in the middle, and they want DeSantis last, second to the last, and Tim Scott. Okay, so now go to a poll that we ran, and this sample size, by the time it ended up being 165,000 votes. 83% you, then DeSantis, then Haley, then Tim Scott. We're capitalists, so our audience is going to be an audience that are business owners, entrepreneurs, guys who like running businesses, conservative ideas. But this one has you first, DeSantis second, Haley third, Tim Scott. We didn't even put Chris Christie because he just wasn't fighting. I thought he was just kind of lobbying for a job. So how do you process when you read all these articles? New York Post, here's what New York Post said about you.
I didn't see that one.
Okay, well, let's read it. If we can pull this up, Rob. Republicans debate verdict. Impressive. Haley shines. Stupid. Vivek self-destructs. Okay?
This is the Post?
This is the Post.
Impressive, Haley, is stupid. It's interesting. I would take a lot of criticisms, and it's a fascinating one. It's never before, other than in the media's and Nikki Haley's assessments of me. Last time she called me in the last debate, she said, "I feel dumber every time I hear you speak," is what she said last time. If you actually think about that, I understand why she feels that way. But that's the dumb or the stupid criticism. That's a new one for me. In presidential politics.
I mean, you were valedictorian. You went to Harvard. You went to Yale. Have you ever been called stupid in your life? That's not a word I would associate.
I like new experiences, so it's an interesting.
But I will tell
an interesting
you,
one for me.
You know what this does, though?
Yeah.
You know what this does? To me, there's so many other adjectives or words you can use than that. You lose credibility using a word like that.
Yeah,
this is New York Post. It's the oldest. It's been around for God knows how long. And so why would they? You're a conservative. Okay, you're calling out anti-establishment. Doesn't this almost position New York Post as establishment?
But New York Post is establishment.
So who do you think they're for?
They phase one of the campaign, they were for Ron DeSantis. Phase two of the campaign, they've decided they're for Nikki Haley. That's the answer. And the really thing they're against is Trump or anything resembling what Trump was for this country. All in some ways, and I respect and admire the New York Post for its reporting when the Hunter Biden laptop story came out that was suppressed. And so, it's a paper that is founded by Alexander Hamilton. There's a lot that I've liked about it when they're going against the establishment of the left. But the fact of the matter is, they are the establishment just with the conservative sheen. And they've gone all in. And I think that here's the third rail for them. I've realized this. If you're doing the woke, anti-woke stuff and whatever, I wrote this book. They've given me plenty of favorable coverage when I'm talking about domestic issues related to being anti-woke. It's like, yes, we're in for that crusade. Good. And I actually exposed a lot of the illegality of the way their own stories were suppressed about Hunter Biden. But the real third rail is foreign policy. If you're giving up on the interventionist, neoconservative model of liberal hegemony, that's the real third rail for these people. And so when I've touched that third rail, and Trump touched that third rail as well, then it's gloves off, game over, because that threatens the existence of their very identity, source of power, and for people like Nikki Haley, the source of money. So that's what I've realized in this campaign is that I thought a few years ago, like when I wrote this book, Woke Inc., I thought I was hitting the third rail. It felt like it, right? I was a guy who was running a business. And it's funny, these, you know, I'll put some of these other recent attacks to one side. They're not important. This clown called Chris Sununu, a man who is a governor of New Hampshire, yeah. But is another establishment creature, is you know, believes that somebody who speaks with the candor that I did on that stage does not reflect the temperament to be president.
Oh, give me a break.
I mean, these people are all different versions of the same thing, showing up in different stuff suits. Some wear heels, some wear different kinds of heels, man heels and women heels, but they're a bunch of stuffed suits with the same thing inside. It's Dick Cheney 2.0. But when I wrote that book, I felt like I was hitting the third rail as a CEO, calling out the woke cancer, and it was at the time. Now it's much easier to criticize wokeness than it was back then. This was in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. But actually, here's what I've learned in this campaign: that wasn't really the third rail. The third rail is really going heavy on clarity that the U.S. should not be electing to enter wars, that war should never be a preference, only a necessity, that the sole obligation of a U.S. policymaker is to U.S. citizens here on American soil, period, not to some other person in another country, that the corruption is bipartisan, and that the super PACs are a cancer in American politics. I mean, if you're hitting these points, that's the real third rail for the establishment. They're happy with people going hard on anti-woke, at least from the right-wing version of the establishment. And so that's been one of my learnings in this campaign, is what you think is the third rail and you're riding it, if they're really still propping you up, you're not really hitting the third rail. You're not really getting to the depth of talking about what others aren't willing to talk about. But I just was speaking my convictions as it relates to the war in Ukraine, which I think has been a corrupt intervention and something that has not advanced U.S. interests. That's really where we say, oh, no, hold on, hold the phone, make sure we suppress this guy in a way that, to bring it full circle, was the way that we were suppressed when we reported on the Hunter Biden laptop story. So it's interesting how that kind of comes full circle, but that's where we are today.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.